One of the most common misconceptions about grief is that it will follow a linear path with a start and a finish. This myth may be due to the fact that many of our most prominent grief theories emphasize a stage theory and the idea that a person must confront their grief and work through a set of stages or tasks in order to come to terms with their loss. We will briefly discuss several stage theories later on in the course. One grief stage theory that you may already have heard of is the 5 stages of grief, which was put forth by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in her book On Death and Dying in 1969. Since their introduction, the 5 stages have become extremely well known, and today you can find them applied to anything from divorce to global markets in the mainstream media. The 5 stages of grief are quite often all a person knows about grief, and so after a loved one dies, many people expect their grief to start progressing through the stages of denial, anger, bargaining, and depression until finally reaching a place of acceptance. But in reality, there is no framework, not even the 5 stages of grief, that can perfectly predict how your grief will evolve in the days, weeks, months, and years following a loss. This is important for you to know because many people wind up feeling confused and abnormal when their grief doesn't follow a predictable pattern. As you may have learned from your own experience, individual grief looks a lot more like a labyrinth with twists and turns and dead ends. Sometimes you'll take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. Sometimes you may feel like you've been tirelessly walking in circles, and sometimes you'll find that you are taking steps in the right direction. Grief happens in fits and starts. It's full of ups and downs, and it requires you to try and try again. As we've already discussed in this course, the intensity of your grief should diminish over time, and eventually you should reach a place where you have more good days than bad. But this doesn't mean that your feelings of loss will ever completely go away, and you shouldn't be surprised if months and even years later you still have bad days when you miss your loved one like crazy or when you ache for the past. Though the idea of always grieving may sound discouraging, just know that as you process your grief, as you learn to integrate your loss into your life, and as you find ways to continue your relationship with your loved one despite their physical absence, the pain of grief will change and evolve, and hopefully someday you'll find that it has become a more peaceful and comforting kind of ache.